show that makes people happy. It's the show where the host looks kinda crappy. You want movie reviews? Well, my dears, we got 'em with your retro vintage host, whose name's Belle Bottoms. So like and subscribe, and doobie, grab your popcorn. Let's get groovy at the movies. Groovy at the movies, baby. Yeah. I like my popcorn hot and buttered. How about you? That's groovy, baby.
Well, hello everybody, and are we feeling groovy today? In case you didn't get it, my name is Belle Bottoms, and this show is called Groovy at the Movies. And if you don't know me by now, well, you probably weren't paying attention because I just introduced myself. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects. Yes, everyone knows that road trips can be a drag. And so I thought that this week we would talk about what else but drag queen road trips. Yes! Okay, we're going to be talking about Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, versus TooWongFoo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. TooWongFoo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar was an American film that was produced by Bevan Kidron. This movie featured 3 drag queens on a road trip across country who were going to compete in a pageant. The movie starts off with these 3 getting ready for the Drag Queen of the Year pageant, which is going to be wildly exciting. So they all get dressed up and go down to the local ballroom. And of course, my first question when I was watching this movie was, well, what kind of pageant was this? Because Miss Continental would never. It looked like the category was wear whatever you like and run amok on stage. Okay, well, it was the finals, so we'll give them a little leeway. We have Patrick Swayze as Vita Boheme. We have Wesley Snipes as Noxeema Jackson. And of course, we have John Leguizamo playing Chichi Rivera. Okay, so all the queens are competing. There's many cameos going on. Everybody is there who's anybody in the world of drag, including Joey Arias, Suzanne Barsh, Suzanne's husband David, Jose Saria, Coco Peru, and many, many more. So it turns out that the winners of this pageant are, of course, Vita and Noxeema. Because if they weren't, what kind of movie would this be? I don't know. Maybe quite a different one. But these 2 win the contest, and then they go backstage to find poor little Chi-Chi crying in the corner. Why is that little Latin drag queen crying? They inquire. Chi-Chi tells them that she wishes that one day she could be as beautiful as them. So they decide to cash in their plane tickets and buy a car and take Chi-Chi with them on a road trip to Los Angeles, where they are competing in their next pageant. Comedy and hilarity ensues. Before they leave, they go to the neighborhood bar where they are met by John J. Jingleheimer Schmidt, played by, of course, the hilarious Robin Williams, in yet another movie where he was surrounded by drag queens, not unlike The Birdcage. Oh, yeah. Or even when he was maybe Mrs. Doubtfire. I don't know. Something was trending there. At any rate, they decide to cash in their plane tickets for a car. and John gets them a car. They end up picking this convertible from hell. It looks fabulous, but also doesn't seem to run very well. So they drive off, and their first stop along the way is going to be to the stately southern mansion where it turns out Vita was raised as a child. Vita hopes for a happy homecoming, but of course when they get there, Vita's mother steps out the front door, takes one look at her, they exchange glances, and the mother quickly runs back inside. To all of us who have been alienated from friends, family, or others because of our gender or our drag or our sexual preferences or what have you, this kind of rang very true. It was very heartbreaking. Moving along, they're driving along and they get pulled over for a busted taillight by none other than Sheriff Dollard, played by Chris Penn. Sheriff Dollard is erroneously called Sheriff Dullard. The name badge on his uniform is spelled incorrectly, thus providing that comic relief, if you can call it that. The problems I had with this character was I just didn't feel like that he was really all that menacing. He was a little too goofy to come off as convincing. But however, he does try and make a pass at Vita, causing her to knock him to the ground. And whatever way that she knocked him to the ground, it knocked him unconscious for a whole day. That must have been one hell of a knock. But at any rate, their car, they drive along further and their car breaks down. And they are led to the town of Snydersville. In Snydersville, they meet Virgil and his wife. His wife is played by Stockard Channing. And Virgil, it turns out, is quite abusive and nasty, but he is the local mechanic and agrees to fix their car. During the course of their stay, it's going to take some time to fix the car, so they decide to stay in Snydersville. What choice do they have? They're career girls, after all. So they meet up with some of the locals and decide to first give the girls a day out, a spa day, if you will. They go and get beauty treatments, they get their hair done, they go to the local thrift store and engage in some vintage fashion shopping, which I just find so much fun, y'all. And then they plan for the annual Strawberry Festival, which, of course, leave it to the queens. They come up with Red and Wild, which is going to be the theme for this particular event. During this time, Sheriff Dullard meets up with Stockard Channing's husband at a bar, and they realize that the three queens are in Snydersville. So in the dramatic conclusion, during the Red and Wild Festival, the drag queens are all just having this huge celebration with the whole town, or I guess part of the town. I'm not really sure who all was there. And then Sheriff Dullard appears and demands with a rifle that Vita come out and show herself. So rather than Vita coming out, a figure dressed in red steps out, which turns out to be Stockard Channing, who is protecting Vita, and says that she is, in fact, the drag queen that the sheriff has been looking for. Well, then other members of the town step forward as well and say that they're the drag queen that the sheriff is looking for, and hilarity ensues. The sheriff, frustrated, runs out, and it's quite hilarious to see his exit. Although, once again, I just never really felt that he was menacing or any kind of particular real threat. Virgil decides to, I guess, leave Stockard Channing's character and leaves the town. So the three career girls say their fond farewells to a town that has fallen in love with them and go on to Los Angeles, where Chi-Chi ends up winning the next pageant. And has a complete makeover. Some things about this movie. First of all, I really liked it. Initially, I have to admit that I was not as big of a fan because compared to Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which came out a year before, I just thought that it was a little sanitized compared to the other version. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But I did enjoy this movie. I did have some questions about it. For example, these three career girls, they're in drag all day and all night. You know, I don't know too many drag queens outside of some rodeo queens who actually sleep in their makeup and then just shave the bottom part in the morning and reapply. But I don't know too many drag performers who spend 24 hours a day, every day, in makeup, which begs the question, were these trans women? I also feel it was a little unbelievable to me that maybe that they were out in the daylight. Sometimes they had to stop for gas or something, but never did anyone seem to question the fact that these were real women. These 6 foot tall, statuesque ladies with hands as big as basketballs. Okay, fine. You know, but if they were trans, then why wasn't that just said? I get it, maybe that the year that this was made, that the public still wasn't ready for that. The public, some public, stupid public, still doesn't seem to be ready for that. But the reality is that it would appear that was the case. What else? As I said, I didn't feel that the sheriff was particularly menacing. I say that only because even though he brandished a weapon, he was made to look kind of jokey and foolish. Even his fellow officers laughed at him. It just didn't seem to be a serious threat. I might have liked this movie a little more with a little reality thrown in. But I guess that's not the point of this. It was escapism. But I would have liked to have seen them actually face some real challenges that drag performers or anyone else that's out there on the road might face, because it's not an easy life. Moving on, I did want to talk briefly about the adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Yes, this movie came out a year before TooWongFoo, and I love this movie as well. Maybe a little different take on it just because of the fact that I feel it was more reality based. And what I mean by that is the fact that in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, I almost said TooWongFoo, we have 2 drag performers and 1 trans woman. The 2 drag performers are played by Guy Pearce and Hugo Weaving. We also have the trans performer who is played by the trans performer Bernadette, played by Terrence Stamp, and it's just a brilliant performance. The 3 of them are performing in a local nightclub, and then one of them gets an invitation to travel across country and go to perform at this nightclub where his ex-wife is running. It's kind of a casino thing. So the 3 of them decide to embark upon this road trip, and they go through the Australian outback, encountering adventures and mayhem along the way. Their first stop, they stop in a small town, and the reactions of the people were quite priceless. I really felt this was realistic. They were looking at them with shocked faces, like, what planet did you step out of? It should be noted that the costumes in this movie were just over the top and crazy. So they looked over the top and crazy, but in a wonderful way. I believe that they also won the Academy Award for Best Costume Design that year. So, yeah, it was that level of costuming. At any rate, they stop in this small town. They stay at this little hotel, which coincidentally has a nightclub, where they encounter their first adversary in the form of this woman named Cheryl, who is just this kind of loud, brassy, obnoxious woman who says that we don't want your kind here, you know. And so her and Bernadette proceed. Bernadette reads her first with a funny read, which I can't say because of YouTube restrictions, but it was hilarious. At any rate, they have a drinking contest. Bernadette wins. Cheryl collapses in a drunken heap, talking about that all she can see everywhere she looks is drag queens. It was pretty funny. Then moving on, they go out. Their bus breaks down. It should be said that their bus has been graffitied and vandalized with some hate speech, which I thought was kind of real. When people are being their authentic selves, not everybody is always going to love it. And I felt that this movie did a good job of showing the challenges that some people face in their day-to-day lives just trying to be themselves. Some of y'all out there know what I'm talking about. At any rate, yes, the bus gets vandalized. They paint it pink. They're not to be overcome by adversity. Then the bus breaks down in the middle of the desert. Well, what is one to do out in the middle of the desert? Well, of course, perform fabulous drag numbers. They run into a tribe of indigenous people in Australia, and proceed to do a performance for them. Then at some point they meet a mechanic who fixes the bus for them. The mechanic does have a wife who is of Filipino descent, and she performs a hysterical number in the bar where they are at. I thought it was pretty hilarious, but there are some critiques about that, which I'll get to in a minute. So they decide to take the mechanic with them to the casino. They finally arrive at their destination. It turns out that the big gag of the whole thing is that Hugo Weaverling has a son by this woman who runs the casino. And he's worried about what the son's going to think about his lifestyle and him being a drag performer and this and that. Well, it turns out that the son already is quite well aware of it and has no problem with it. So they perform the 11 o'clock rousing number. It's wonderful. And Bernadette ends up with the mechanic. The other two end up going back home. And it's a happy ending all the way around. This movie was quite lovely. Like I said, the costumes were amazing. I liked the fact that the entertainers, the drag performers in this case, actually performed. In TooWongFoo, we see a bit of dancing about or whatnot, but they're really not giving you the full lip sync for your life kind of moment, which we do get in Priscilla. It was nice to see them actually perform as performers. Also, this movie did receive some criticism. People said that the character of the Filipino woman who I mentioned was just a very bad stereotype, and actually there is some argument that that could be true. Looking back on it now, maybe if I was Filipino, or even if not, that I should feel a little bit uncomfortable about the portrayal. But at the time, the fact that somebody was popping ping pong balls out of somewhere where ping pong balls shouldn't fly out of, I don't care what nationality they were, I probably would have laughed anyways. But all in all, that was our 2 drag road trip movies, and this was my first Groovy at the Movies review. What did you think? Should I do more of them? What movies would you like to see? What TV series? Let me know in the comments. Please be sure to like and subscribe. YouTube algorithms work on that. So if you had a good time sharing some groovy moments with me, then please like, share, and subscribe. And I thank you most profusely, and y'all have a groovy day, okay? Groovy at the Movies.